Today we're going to be looking at creating AWS resources with Terraform. Terraform is an infrastructure as code tool, meaning that you can define exactly what your infrastructure needs to look like, define it in code, and Terraform will do the rest. And it'll build it all out for you without you really having to do anything. It can help you automate your deployments, but it also keeps everything in code so that it can be tracked in version control. This means it can be reviewed and audited very easily, which is helpful if you're part of a large organization or working as part of a team. So in this video, we're going to deploy out some basic AWS infrastructure just using Terraform. And then we're going to go a little bit further and provision the infrastructure for a whole web app. But if you want to follow along this tutorial, you're going to need an AWS account, the Terraform command line tool installed on your machine, and the AWS CLI tool installed with your credentials added.
So we've got to open a terminal here, and the first thing we're going to start off by doing is creating a project directory. This is going to house all of our Terraform code so that we can keep everything organized and managed. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a main.tf file. This is where all of our Terraform code is actually going to live. And we're going to start off by defining an AWS provider. This is the thing that's actually going to interact with the AWS console for us and provision our resources. Now that we've got our AWS provider set up, all we need to define is the actual resource we want to create. Here we've got an example EC2 instance with a specific AMI and an instance type. Now we can simply save off that file with all of our Terraform resources defined in it, and we can run the Terraform init command. This is going to go off and initialize all of the Terraform modules that we need and set everything up for us. Now that this is done, we can run the Terraform plan command. What this is going to do is this is going to give us a nice overview of everything Terraform wants to change, any additions and any deletions that it's going to make to our infrastructure.
And this gives us a nice overview of everything that will be changed before anything actually happens.
So let's make sure that this is doing what we think it is. We can see it's adding one resources of an AWS instance with a name of example, one to add, 0 to change, and 0 to destroy. Now that we're happy with this, we can run the Terraform apply command. This is going to go off and actually make the changes that we need to. You can see again it's asking for permissions and checking to make sure everything is correct. In this case, we're going to type yes. Now Terraform is going to go off on its own, and it's going to actually go off and create all of those AWS resources within Terraform. And we get a nice little output explaining what it's currently creating and what it's currently doing and how long each of the steps is taking. And it looks like we have a success. We've got one resource added, 0 changed, and 0 destroyed, exactly what we were expecting. So let's go into the AWS console and check to see if this instance is actually there. And there we go. We can see a nice Terraform demo instance exactly as we spec'd it out. We've got our AMI that we chose, and we've even got the name tag provided as well. But what if we didn't want to just create an EC2 instance? What if we wanted to create more? We could go over to this Terraform registry and see a nice overview of all the different resources we could create. And in this case, we're going to be looking at creating an S3 bucket. And so we're just going to find the resource in here and go through some of the resources that are required and maybe copy an example so that we can paste that into our main.tf file. Once we've pasted that in there, we can change any of the parameters that we see fit. In here, we're just going to change the name of the bucket itself, and we're going to try and look to add some bucket versioning to this. We can see that bucket versioning isn't something that's come with the example straight out of the box, so again we're going to go back to the registry documentation and see if we can find it for ourselves. And here in the documentation we can see that we got the AWS S3 bucket versioning. It seems that we need to define our own resource in the main.tf file and then just reference the bucket name in there. So we're going to copy and paste this example into our main.tf file as well. Now we would normally need to change the name, but luckily because our resource is called example and the bucket on here is called example, we can leave it as is. And we're going to run through the same stages again, starting with a Terraform plan to see an overview of what things will be changed in this deployment. We can see it's not trying to recreate the EC2 instance, it's just adding these S3 bucket and the bucket versioning. And once we've reviewed our plan, we can run the Terraform apply command to actually go off and build that infrastructure again, which is building out the S3 bucket and the bucket versioning tool. Once we've said yes, it'll go off and create those. Let's go back into the AWS console now and see that there is indeed an S3 bucket with the bucket name that we identified as. It's got the properties including the bucket versioning on there, and it's also got the tag name that we specified on there as well.
Now I'm going to add a little bit more detail into this main.tf file so we can build up some more infrastructure.
I've just gone through the registry and I've added a VPC, some subnets, and an internet gateway to build out a relevant architecture to do a simple web application on an EC2 to server. You can see me going through all of the main.tf files and all the ingress and everything that I've set up here, which is fairly simple to do. We can just follow the registry defined, or we can just get, an AI to do it for us. If you are using AI to make these changes, make sure you're really studying the Terraform plan commands to make sure it's doing exactly what you want it to do and nothing more, and not deleting any infrastructure that you want. Here we can see I've deleted the old EC2 instance and I'm actually recreating another one. So we can see this EC2 instance that we created initially is going to be deleted because it's no longer defined as part of our code. But we are going to be defining a whole group of other resources that we can then look to and build. One of the nice things about Terraform is it actually keeps a live state of your infrastructure. So if you ever go off and delete anything, then it will go off and actually delete those instances. So if you look at your Git repository, you should see an overview of your current infrastructure system, all the settings and all the resources. And since I'm happy with that plan, I'm going to run the Terraform apply command, and it's going to go off and build out all those resources into my AWS account without me having to do anything at all. I can just sit back and relax as Terraform does all the work for me. And once we receive a success message, we can head on over to the AWS console and make sure everything has been deployed correctly. Now we've defined all of the resources required to set up an AWS web server that is accessible from the internet. So if we go on to our web server, we should be able to find its public IP address, log on to that public IP address and see our app in action. And we get the message hello from Terraform web app displayed on our browser, indicating that the infrastructure has been set up correctly and we have internet access from our web server.
And you can see by building out all of this infrastructure, we've got everything we need to make a publicly available web server. And that's everything you need to know for the basics. If you found this helpful, do consider subscribing. And if you want to learn more about some AWS services, click this video here.